It was early June. I was taking a long road trip with my 9-year-old son, Noah, driving down to West Virginia to visit family. It was a stressful drive from the start. My sedan's air conditioning had died a week earlier, and it was a sweltering summer day. By the 6-hour mark, both of us were irritable, sticky, and exhausted. Because we had left late in the afternoon, darkness had already settled over the Appalachian Hills by the time we hit Interstate 79 around 9 p.m. Noah started complaining that he urgently needed a bathroom. There was already tension between us over a small argument earlier in the trip, and his nonstop whining made me snap at him. We ended up in one of those cold, tense silences where neither of us wanted to speak. Eventually, a blue rest area sign flashed in my headlights. I pulled off the highway into a dimly lit, isolated rest stop. The facility was tiny, just a small brick building with 2 restrooms, a couple of vending machines, and a few picnic tables tucked against a thick tree line. There were no other cars around, except for a beat-up white Ford F-150 parked on the far side of the lot. I pulled up near the restroom building. Noah shoved his door open without saying a word and ran inside. I left the engine idling, sitting in the humid driver's seat, staring out into the dark. We were at that bitter stage of an argument where words felt pointless, so I expected the remaining 2 hours of the drive to be completely silent. About 2 minutes later, I heard the rear passenger door click open and shut. I wanted to say something to Noah, maybe apologize for snapping, but my pride got the better of me. I stayed silent, put the car in drive, and pulled back onto the dark, empty interstate. As I merged into the right lane, I noticed the white F-150 from the rest stop had pulled out right behind me. I moved over into the left lane to let him pass. Instead of passing, the truck swerved into the left lane behind me and began flashing its high beams rapidly. "Just an aggressive jerk," I muttered under my breath. I switched back to the right lane. The truck immediately followed, riding my bumper while blinding me with his brights. My heart rate started spiking. I slowed down to 40 miles an hour, hoping he'd just pass. Instead, the pickup pulled up alongside my driver's side door in the passing lane. The driver lowered his window and started frantically screaming something, pointing wildly toward my back seat. Through the glare of his lights, he looked rough, unkempt, disheveled, and agitated. I couldn't make out a single word over the wind and road noise. He pointed aggressively at the shoulder, signaling for me to pull over. "Stay calm back there, Noah," I said aloud, keeping my eyes on the road. "If this guy tries anything, I'm flooring it." I pulled off onto the grassy shoulder. The pickup swerved in right behind me, its headlights illuminating my entire cabin. Before I could even put the car in park, the driver threw his door open and came sprinting up to my window. Panicking, I shoved the gear shift into drive, ready to slam on the gas. "Wait! Stop!" the man screamed, slamming his hand against my driver's window. "That's not your kid!" I froze, my brain stalling. "What?" "That is not your kid in the back!" he shouted. Before I could process his words, the back right door slammed open. I whipped my head around just in time to see a tall, lean figure scramble out of my back seat and sprint full speed into the dense, pitch-black woods bordering the highway. It was a fully grown adult wearing a dark hooded jacket. I scrambled out of the car, screaming into the tree line, but the figure was already swallowed by the night. A wave of pure, cold horror hit me as the reality of what just happened crashed down. Noah. "He's still at the rest stop," the truck driver yelled. "Get in!" I threw my car into reverse, cut across the median grass, and sped back toward the rest area, with the F-150 right behind me. 30 seconds later, we pulled back into the lot. Noah was standing outside the brick restroom building under the flickering fluorescent light, looking confused and shivering in the night air.
I threw the car into park, ran over and pulled him into a tight hug, out of breath and shaking violently. The pickup driver pulled up alongside us, explaining to Noah what had happened while I stood there in complete shock. I thanked the truck driver profusely before he drove off. Noah was fascinated by the whole thing, but I was sick to my stomach. I never saw the face of the person who climbed into my back seat while I was staring at the dashboard, and I don't ever want to know what they intended to do once we reached the middle of nowhere.
My girlfriend, Maya, and I took a long road trip out to California. The drive there was completely fine. Bright skies, clear highways, easy driving. Our trip back, however, was a 10-hour stretch through desolate desert highways, mostly in total darkness. We had left California around midday and made a couple of quick stops for gas and food. By midnight, we were passing through a barren stretch of Interstate 15. Around 12:30 a.m., we grabbed food at a drive-thru near the state line and immediately got back on the freeway. I started eating my burger while driving, a habit Maya hated even on good days. But a few minutes later, the sky opened up into a blinding, torrential downpour. Sudden heavy rain impact on glass, wind howling. "Pull over right now," Maya insisted, her voice tight with anxiety. "You can't eat and drive in a flash flood." I gave in, pulling our sedan onto the narrow shoulder of the barren highway. The rain was pounding against the glass so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel being thrown against the car. Then came the bang. Both Maya and I jumped out of our seats. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a fallen tree branch or debris blown by the storm. But when I turned to my left, a dark silhouette was pressed directly against my window, blocking out the red glow of the taillights. Maya let out an ear-piercing scream. Through the blurred, rain-soaked glass, I could tell it was a person, but over the deafening roar of the storm, I couldn't hear what they were saying. I cracked my door open an inch. "Please help me," a frantic voice screamed through the gap. It was a woman. She was drenched, her hair matted to her face, wearing a soaked, oversized coat. She looked terrified and desperate. "I need a ride, please. My car broke down," she cried. What was I supposed to do? Leave a woman to drown in a desert flash flood miles from civilization? "Get in the back," I yelled over the storm. Maya shot me a look of pure disbelief. A look clearly said, "Are you completely insane?" The woman climbed into the back seat. Cold, damp air filled the cabin. "Where are you heading?" I asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. She didn't answer.
I adjusted the mirror to get a better look at her. She was sitting stiffly in the middle of the rear seat, staring directly at the back of my head. Her face wasn't scared anymore. It was entirely blank, a cold, neutral, hollow stare that sent a shiver down my spine. "Hey," I repeated, louder this time. "Where you dropped off at?" She slowly shrugged her shoulders, her eyes unblinking. "Okay," I said out loud, trying to cut the tension. "I'll drop you off at the next service station in 10 miles. I put the car in drive and stepped on the gas, merging back onto the pitch-black highway. Without warning, an ear-shattering scream erupted from the back seat. Not a cry for help, but a furious, deranged shriek. Before I could react, 2 wet, freezing hands wrapped tightly around my throat from behind, digging into my windpipe. I gasped for air, losing control of the steering wheel as the car swerved wildly toward the concrete center divider. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the wet asphalt. Maya reacted instantly. She turned in her seat and started violently slashing at the woman's face and arms with her long acrylic nails. The woman's grip loosened as she let out a howl of pain, clutching her face. I put the car in park,
unbuckled, threw my door open, and reached into the back seat with both hands. I grabbed the woman by her heavy, wet coat and threw her body out onto the rain-slicked pavement. She landed hard on the shoulder. She lay in the rain, pressing her bloody face into her hands, crying hysterical, broken words. "Please, please, please," she repeated over and over in a pathetic sob. I didn't answer. I jumped back into the driver's seat and hit the power lock button. The moment the lock clicked, the woman slammed her body against my window, pounding furiously on the glass while letting out maniacal, unhinged screams that sounded like something out of a nightmarish asylum. I floored the accelerator, leaving her screaming into the storm behind us. Maya called 911 immediately, reporting a violent, unstable person wandering the interstate shoulder. We didn't stop until we reached home 3 hours later. To this day, I never open my car door for anyone on the highway.
Back in 2010, I drove my Ford F-150 from my home in Pennsylvania down to rural Georgia to spend a week with my cousins. It was about a 14-hour drive, and I planned to make the entire trip in a single day. I hit the road at 10 a.m. I stopped once for lunch, ate a sandwich at a rest area around 3 p.m., and by 11:30 p.m. I had just filled up my tank for the final stretch. My GPS showed an arrival time of 12:30 a.m. I was exhausted. My eyes were heavy, but I was so close to my destination that I decided to push through rather than find a hotel. After leaving the gas station, the GPS routed me off the main highway and onto backroad county routes in Oglethorpe County, Georgia. My truck sat high off the ground, and I had installed a heavy-duty LED light bar on the front bumper, which illuminated the pitch-black, tree-lined roads like daylight. I made a left turn onto an unlit 2-lane road. The speed limit was 45, but because there wasn't a single house, streetlight, or car in sight, I was cruising at around 55 miles an hour. Suddenly, 4 bright red reflective shapes appeared in the middle of the road directly ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes, my tires barking as the heavy F-150 came to a halt just 10 feet before hitting the obstacles. They were large, orange traffic construction drums, blocking both lanes. Confused and angry, I grabbed a wooden baseball bat from behind my seat, opened the truck door, and stepped out onto the asphalt. I walked up to the traffic drums, holding the bat at my side. As my eyes adjusted, I saw what was laid out on the road behind the drums. It was a homemade spike strip. A long wooden board, studded with dozens of thick, upright steel spikes, laid carefully across the entire width of the lane. My stomach dropped. There was no construction crew out here at midnight. This was a setup. Before I could turn around, a voice called out from the thick pine forest on the left side of the road. "Help! Please! Down here!" I froze. "Who's out there?" I yelled, raising the bat. No answer. I took 2 steps toward the edge of the shoulder, using the bright beam of my truck's light bar to cut through the trees. Out of the corner of my eye, without looking directly at him, I spotted a figure crouched low behind a cluster of thick bushes 15 feet into the woods. He was waiting for me to walk in. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I calmly turned my back, deliberately walked back to my truck, got into the cab, and locked the doors. As I pulled the door shut, I looked out my side window. 2 dark silhouettes stepped out from the tree line onto the shoulder, walking steadily toward my truck doors. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the F-150 into drive, cut the wheel hard to the right, and drove off the road onto the dirt ditch, bypassing the traffic drums and the spike strip entirely. As my truck surged back onto the paved road, I glanced in my rearview mirror.
Standing in the red glow of my taillights were 3 tall silhouettes standing beside the traffic drums, watching me drive away into the night. Within seconds, they faded into the dark, leaving me alone on the empty road. I made it to my cousin's house 20 minutes later. I reported the trap to the county sheriff, but by the time deputies arrived, the drums and the spikes were gone. I still take road trips, but I never, ever take back roads after midnight. If you're driving late tonight, pay attention to the roads and always double-check who's sitting in your back seat.